today on the Kenya We Deserve. This is the 5th series, and we're delighted to continue this conversation around the kind of Kenya that we deserve, following a very good conversation with the young professionals last week. Again, just a quick reminder that this series is sponsored by One Voice Consortium, which is the umbrella organization of Kenyans abroad. We have roughly 86 groups within the association, and hoping to make a contribution to what's happening in the country today and what should happen in the days to come. Now, the intent of this series is to just look into what's happening in the country in Kenya, particularly following up the Gen Z demonstrations across the streets in Nairobi and elsewhere in the country, and of course, interest of Kenyans in the diaspora. Just a quick reminder that what we're doing here is not political. OVC and KDL TV are not allied to any political party or a political. All Kenyans in the diaspora and those ones on the ground are trying to do is to bring reason to the conversation so that together we can build a nation that we deserve. And when we talk about deserve, it really matters less of what political persuasion you are. So in today's discussion, we are honored to have three distinguished guests who happen to be daughter and sons of Kenya, who have traveled the world, have experience, and have the desire to contribute just like any happening. So today we'll be privileged to have three panelists. We'll begin with, we do have from Atlanta, Georgia, we'll have Natasha Miriti Johnson, who happens to be a financial literacy educator and also does lots of work, community work in and around Atlanta, Georgia, and across the diaspora in the United States. We also have today joining us Dr. John Muraha. Is a renowned journalist, worked in Kenya for a long time, and also has worked here in the east coast of the United States, and of course written a lot about the political process and governance in Kenya and elsewhere around the globe. So his insights and contribution in the show today definitely are going to be of great help. Also to join us momentarily is Professor Shadrach Nasongo, a good friend of mine. He's a professor of international studies at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, but today he's on the ground in the nation of Murembe. They will be joining us here shortly. And here we do have the panelists. Good to see you, lady and gentlemen. I must say to the camera and on record that you all look great, but more so, Natasha, you look great. And the gentlemen, you as well. So again, thank you so very kindly for allowing us, for accepting to come in and make your contributions to this conversation around the kind of Kenya we deserve. A disclaimer here that the views and opinions that will be expressed by the four of us are our own, and they do not by any means represent the organization for which we work. I think it's important to have that on record. And for our viewers who are watching this, please, we ask you to be part of the conversation. And all you need to do at the moment is to go to our Facebook page, which is KDL TV Facebook, and also on Twitter and YouTube. Make your contribution there. If you do have a question, please feel free to post that and we'll go to the panelists. But also don't forget to subscribe, because that's the only way you're going to view this and get notification whenever we have the shows. Now, the recordings also will be available on One Voice Consortium OVC website for you to view and make your contributions later. But for now, it's my honor and privilege to welcome the panelists, and I will very kindly request them to very quickly introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with my good friend, Professor. Go ahead, Shadrach.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Wakari. So my name is Shadrach Nasongo. I teach comparative politics at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, where I have taught for the last 19 years. And I'm currently in Webuye, Kenya. In 2 weeks, I'll be back at my workstation.
So thank you very much, Professor Nasongo. On the ground, of course, you're going to help us, give us raw data on what's happening there. So then sandwiched between us, a good friend as well, our sister, Natasha Johnson.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Natasha Miriti Johnson. Very glad to be here. Thank you, One Voice Consortium, Dr. Wakari, and KTR TV. I am a financial literacy educator, and I'm also a community advocate. With One Voice Africa, 26 different community leaders in the from Africa. We cover economic, social, and political affairs, and I'm also a member of TOPAC, which is the African Women's Public Advocacy Committee, and we also cover social, economic, and public affairs. Thank you.
Excellent introduction. Thank you so much, Natasha. We also have renowned journalist, Dr. John Mura, who is in Maryland. If you could very briefly introduce yourself to our viewers as well.
My name is John Mula. I live in the DMV area, that is the District Maryland, Virginia area, in the East Coast. I've lived in this area for close to 30 years. I've worked in various development institutions. I've also been an active participant in discourses, political discourses in the Kenyan political scene for quite a while. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you as well, Dr. John. And by the way, thank you for the great work you've done in the journalist industry, both in Kenya and here in the US. Of course, your insight will be always grateful. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to this. And Shadrach, I'll start with you in a moment. The conversation here is about the Kenya that we deserve. Of course, we salute the Gen Z for going to the streets, risking their lives to what I've called on this show, the conscience of a sleeping nation. The key issue is not really about Gen Z. It is about the totality of government, the totality of the promises of today and tomorrow that has not really been met, that we cannot squarely blame on an individual. I think it's a collective effort that we really should remove the emotions away, focus on where the real issues are, and that way we'll be able to build a better, stable future for the nation compared to globe. So I'll start with you, Shadrach. You are on the ground and you're very passionate about politics and obviously very passionate about our country. What's your quick reaction on what's happening on the ground?
Thank you very much, Dr. Okari. I've had the privilege of actually the ground and witnessing what is going on, and it provided a good opportunity actually for the government, especially the Kenya Kwanza administration, to reinvent itself, of taking a new direction in matters of governance. You see, the Constitution, I think, provides for a minimum of 14 members in the cabinet, a maximum, I think, of 21. In my view, the president did very well to dissolve the cabinet following the protests by the Gen Z who raised very pertinent issues of governance. In dissolving the government, the president was handed a very good opportunity to reinvent himself, to form a new government that will be seen to be effective in terms of delivering the services to Kenyans. On the ground here now, very many people are disappointed by the fact that he ended up reappointing 21, reappointing those he had sacked, and therefore the essence here is that it is politics. When the president could actually have formed a slim cabinet of 14 members, given the dire resource straits in the country, form a government of 14, draw the membership from expert fields, not the usual political personalities. And so there is a lot of people are not happy with what has gone on, even when the president had actually a good opportunity to reinvent himself and demonstrate he is actually focused on taking a new direction in matters of governance.
Okay, so thank you, Shadrach. Again, that is what's happening on the ground, and thank you for sharing what you feel that people are thinking, and of course those ones in the diaspora. So I'm watching it from a distance, and I will bring in Natasha very quickly. Your reaction to what's happening on the ground there.
And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Kari. My thoughts are negatively affected by all the demonstrations. We pray for you definitely with your families. It was a very good opportunity for us to take a different direction as Kenyans. We need to look at the way that we are governing. Do we have good governance? Are we actually putting people in positions in places that are needed with the expertise required to do that. The formula, I believe, needs to also be looked at. We must take a look at, okay, what is the project? What is the call? What does that area require? Look for somebody with a subject matter expert in that area. It's a population of over 50 million Kenyans. Now, if you want to balance expertise and also somebody who is, how should we say, able with the existing, with the existing infrastructure that we have, or the existing people that are in office, and then on top of that, assess what is the work that needs to be done. All that needs to be considered before appointments or before projects are undertaken, and of course vetted. And I do also believe once you present your project, it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be executed and in a timely manner. These seem like very simple and straightforward ways of doing things, but I'm afraid that's where our opportunity is. And it is not a very big ask. This is something that we are able to do. So I will stop right there and let somebody else give their 2 cents and add on to that.
Thanks. So, and I'm aware that we are very passionate about our country. In a moment, we're going to dive into the details of this. So that is on what the issues are. John, and I'm sure you've written a lot on this. You're very experienced with this, and of course, we've exchanged notes about it. If you could, just a quick, from your vantage point, what's your reaction to what's happening on the ground? And then we'll get to the niche details of it.
I think for me, it's kind of not unexpected the way events are happening. First of all, the kind of disruption that took place, it points to something. There was pressure was building up, and discuss the causes of that, be it economic or political and so on. But from a bigger picture, you have to ask yourself the question. We're all saying the government should do this to respond to the needs of the moment that are as expressed. Why have they not done that? So the question becomes, you now begin to say, what are the constraints? And the constraints then will lead you to understanding the structure of the political system in Kenya. And Gen Z hunted out the various weaknesses, the various points that, the system kind of fails people. But the system as structured at the moment is in a very, very weak state. It cannot overnight reconfigure itself. So when the President Ruto that comes around and reappoints the cabinet, I can imagine he probably is facing far more constraints than we can imagine. As why is that happening? Because our Kenyan state, our Kenyan society has got certain characteristics that have accrued over many years. And there are certain forces, dominant factions in that country that in a way hold it together or make it work as it works or doesn't work at the moment. So if you want to ask for a total change overnight, I think you'll be expecting too much. And I see this as a long drawn out process, which may result in very positive changes. But let us not expect things to change overnight.
Okay.
Thank you,
so that's
Mr. Kari.
Okay, thank you. So, quick reaction there from the three of you, and I appreciate it. So let's go back to the conversation. And emotions, politics is emotive. That's expected. We all love our country. So we will look at this from different angles. And again, the key point here, no matter our differences, in the end, we are proud Kenyans and we want to make our positive contributions towards the future of our nation. I think that's important to underline here. So, but let me begin with Nasongo. Nasongo, I'm sure you've done a lot of this, and for our viewers, Nasongo has written very good articles, particularly on the Hustler Nation, comparative analysis. Very quickly lay ground, how did we get ourselves here?
Well, if I focus specifically on the idea of nation, during the campaign, the Kenya Kwanza Alliance styled itself as a very movement that would approach the issues of governance with a view to uplifting the living of the bottom people, the mamambogas, the border borders, the Juakali workers, and so on. And that is how that movement became very popular, styling itself as populist as that, against what they called the dynasties. And that was a very sweet music to the masses in the country. And the expectation was that once Kenya Kwanza Alliance came to power, they actually put in policies that will focus on delivering for the common person, the Maga, the border, the Juakali worker. But look at what happened. Immediately they took power. The first major thing they did was to allocate almost 1 billion shillings to purchasing of new vehicles, offices. The office of the president, the office of the deputy president, and the office of the chief cabinet secretary. Almost 1 billion. Now, at the same time, the government was arguing that they had empty coffers. You have inherited empty coffers. Why will you allocate 880 million Kenya shillings to purchasing new vehicles when there are already vehicles at Apple? Do you see? If I compare that with a guy called Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso when he came to power, the first thing he did was to sell off the fleet of luxury government vehicles. The second thing he did was to slash salaries of officials, ministers, and civil servants, including his own. Now, for us, then things started going wrong immediately. The Kenya Kwanza Alliance came to power because of the policies they began implementing. The other thing that was very depressing was the idea of employing so-called chief cabinet secretaries when we have permanent secretaries already, and employing 50 of them beyond the maximum ministries of 21. And that was just an act of rewarding political cronies. And so what Dr. Mulaa has mentioned about the fact that there is a cabal of individuals in the country or factions that have actually held the state captive, it is very right. And it seems like a change is not going to come very easily. If the government campaigned on the basis of popular policies like it did, and then comes to power and does what it has done, then we are in a lot of problems.
Okay, so thank you, Shadrach. So I'll get you in a minute. John, I know you worked a lot on transformational aspects of government and leadership. In a moment, I'll get to you. But Natasha, I want to bring you so that you give your insights on the same, but also underline a key point. The issues that are being affected or happening in the country today, quite frankly, didn't start last week. The nation has been independent for close to 60 years. There must have been institutional issues that have been there on the ground to a point where, and they're not just going on their own behalf, they're quite frankly going on behalf of millions of Kenyans and friends of Kenya. In your view, Natasha, how did we get ourselves here?
And that's the bottom. I think to find a solution, we must really look at that and really try and understand where the genesis is. Once we find what the genesis is, what is the current place that we are. So I want to say that I think we have lost a lot of the sense of community that we have had previously. And if you look at it, in most previous settings, in most African traditional settings, you had folks who cared about their children, folks who cared about the livestock, the family, the entire community. You had leaders who thought about the community, etc. And so therefore there was a cycle in place or a system in place whereby folks actually concerned with the needs of the community, folks actually, that was their job to oversee those needs. And so there was a system in process. Now, we've adopted a different system right now, and we have lost that sense of who is we, right? And who is looking for after all our needs, right? So I would put it to us that we need to also look at what exactly are we asking governments to actually be responsible for. We I would take the example of the Gen Z protest, and I had this once or twice. Oh, the Gen Zs, they're doing this protest. The Gen Zs, they're doing this protest. Well, the Gen Zs are not an isolated thing that's across the board affecting us, because those Gen Zs, they come home, and guess who has to look after them? The parents. And guess who's actually responsible for some of the, being able to feed to finances into that home? That's the government or whoever your employer is who's being affected. So this is a whole cycle here. So I think we need to start also changing the way that we view ourselves, isolated, understanding that whatever happens to one is happening to all. And therefore, how do we make this all work out for the benefit of everyone? We need to come back down to those spaces. And we have different instruments that we can do that. But if we do not have a recognition that we are all in this together as a country, as a people, it's not going to work out. It just will not, because there's always going to be, okay, I came into power, so it is my turn and my. And I know I told you what I said, but okay, those are, and it hasn't worked thus far. And so I feel like we need to go back down to the roots of the matter, figure out exactly what we are doing, what we are saying, are we together? Who is we? Or everybody in that equation to start off with. All right? And I'll leave somebody else to add to that.
That's a good way of closing that, because the next segment works on the we. So it's much easier for us to go to the streets, express our emotions, and blame an individual. But in reality, we know it's not just about an individual, or in this case, it's not just about one political party that has been in office for a few months or a few years. That's not fair assessment. We'll get to the we part of it, but I'm going to bring in Dr. John Mulaha. John has done great work, by the way. He's written a lot about transformational government, a lot of this. And John, on the sidelines, will you talk about the question of structure, government structure? Right? We talked about the role of government and the interface of the state. If you could, in a language that is understandable to the common guy, could you explain how we failed on that end, and then we get to how we move forward?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Listening to the Gen Z spokespeople diagnose this problem and what solution asked by their insights. Sometimes I sit back and say, these guys have not lived long enough, but it's like they've read all the books on political change and what they are born with. And some of them are very, very insightful. It takes years of research to come to those conclusions. And they are stating them very, very clearly. When one of the leaders says, this system is not working for us, he's basically pointing to saying, there's a system, there's a structure. It's not working for us. And here is why it's not working. And this is how we can correct it. So they have thought through the whole thing. They're not just mouthing. And actually, I'm really astounded at to use the word again, at the level of intelligence and wisdom of some of these guys who are talking on this issue. Now, we know that, of course, in the heat of the moment, or if you are kind of you have this in the prophetic leader, you'd want immediate change to take place and to satisfy your conditions. And that's how social movements work. They are not hesitant. You don't say, we want to do this, but we can, draw back if you give us. They go full scale forward. And I think the Gen Z has done that. And they're pointing out something that perhaps for the first time is being in the space. And this idea is, what exactly is the government? How does it relate to us as a people? And who is subordinate to who? And this question, this question may have been asked in certain specific circles before, but was never a broad-based public discussion. So when these guys say, whatever, the government must reform, it gives way to better systems of governance, they are saying that, look, we need not be stuck in one spot trying to reinvent the wheel all the time. We should try something else, because so far what we have tried has not worked, or it has not worked to the extent of satisfying the majority of us. And if we continue along this path of non-caring, just assuming that somehow we shall muddle along and the country will go along, the country could face a bleak future. In retrospect, when Kenyans look back, they'll look at this movement as part of their salvation, something that came along and actually made them course correct and saved them to a better, and pointing them to a better future. I think that is my analysis so far.
Good. Thank you, John. John, I'll get to you in a moment, but I want to do something here. Shadrach, I'm going to skip you for a minute because I'm going to give you extra minutes to explain stuff here. Go back to I think it's very easy again to throw words on the keyboard or shout against the current government. That is really not helpful. It's not helpful. We can do all these things, but we take, for example, the president. No matter how you look at it, he's human. We are the people. We, the people, put him in office. So, in a sense, we cannot entirely blame him. It's a collective failure of the system. Natasha, if you could verify, we, in the context of what is happening in the country.
I'm sorry, I did not hear the full sentence, the question. It went in and out. Your audio was in and out.
No worry, I'll repeat that. So, sure, absolutely. So what I'm saying here, we can talk about these blame individuals, but in the end, it is about us, we, the people. In the context of what's happening in the country, in the context of what John was saying,
So it's a very good thing that the Gen Z are very, very well read. And I do agree with Dr. Mullah on that one. It was fantastic to hear the articulation and the understanding of what the problem is. But if you looked at what they were saying, these are basic things for everybody. Okay, so I'm not able to get a job. I don't know where I'm spending my money, I'm getting the benefits of it. I don't see a future for myself. I do not think that what you are saying is really, you're really considering what I'm actually wanting to do with the rest of my life and with and this country of mine. So if we look at those four things, that actually pertains to everybody. If you are, a Kenyan, or if you're a taxpayer, parent, if you are a worker, if you are, now that Gen Z, going to college, thinking of going even into high school or whatever the case may be, we have got everybody in this equation. The opportunity that I am finding that's very important for us to recognize is to see ourselves in that situation. So if you are if you are food, shelter, and clothing, and future is important to you, you are. So I would say this all the way until the folks that hold office, because in order to hold office, and that's why we need to look at everybody and just kind of come together. Let's all have a conversation and have this conversation jointly without judgments, without a lot of, let's just have a conversation about that. How do you want the next couple of years to look like? And I'm sure if everybody talks about that, they know that to go that they're able to feed for their families, they're able to plan for their future, they're able to course correct, and they're able to come and have a free and open dialogue. That to me actually includes 99.999% of the people. But it's one thing to know that you need these things, and another thing to realize that, no, I'm actually part of the equation. And that's the challenge to the Kenyans of today.
Okay, so sounds good. Thank you, Natasha. Eloquent report. So I'm going to bring in actually what Natasha said, because John did allude to the fact that unless we look at this carefully and very carefully, there is a danger that this will spill out of control, quite frankly, in the near future. So, Shadrach, if you could, what does we really mean here? And looking at it from your vantage point on the ground, the Gen Zs on the ground in the streets fighting for the nation. But what we have seen in the last few weeks, to your point, is this appointment of a few individuals. Is that what they are fighting for? And is that the kind of future that we need? Shadrach.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okari. You are right. What is the we? My understanding of the we is we as the citizens of the country, the people of Kenya. We, the people of Kenya. In fact, defined by the Constitution in the preamble, the 2010 Constitution. That is the basis of the we. Now, given what has happened in response to the Gen Z demands, the understanding on the ground is that what has happened is not actually what the Gen Z were fighting for. It is not. Their focus was on the notion of governance. Their focus was on the idea of corruption. Their focus was on the idea of how ostentatious the political class are in terms of showing off what they have accumulated. There is one politician, a cabinet minister, who went on a TV show and was talking about his watch of 900,000 Kenya shillings, talking of a belt of 50,000, was talking of shoes of 80,000. Another politician went also on TV show and was displaying his watch of 17 million. Now, when you look at their earnings and the kind of lifestyles they are leading, that is what is anger among the people who do not have anything. Where are these people getting the resources they are getting to live the kind of life they are living? And so what Gen Z was saying was they need to have discipline and focus on delivery of services to the people. And yet what obtains is that the police goes in there for itself being as the people. And an illustrative example of that is the extent to which, for example, the president has traveled around the world. Within 6 months of taking power, he extended the external travel. It needed a supplementary budget to complete the financial year. 18 billion in the first 20 months of the Kenya Kwanza government, 18 billion Kenya shillings have been spent on travel. How, as a government, do you, let me talk specifically about the president. How do you, as president, who is saying we don't have resources, we inherited a broke government, and yet the president travels from State House, Nairobi, to go and commission a borehole in Murang'a? A borehole could be commissioned by an MC, a member of the county assembly. Do you know how much resources are on a presidential travel from Nairobi to Murang'a? Millions of Kenya shillings. And yet you are saying Kenyans should tighten their belts. So that is the source of the anger of the people in this country. And unfortunately, what is happening, or what has happened in terms of reconstituting the government, it points to the idea that it is just politics as usual. So out of the protests, out of the demonstrations, the political class has regrouped and it is politics as usual.
So it's a painful picture to note, John. I'll bring here in a moment as well. But again, part of why we're doing this series as a One Voice Consortium, again, as I said, is to look at the totality of our socio-economic and the geopolitical environment. What we're looking at here, and I think that's what and I say, if you look at the different sectors of our lives, you look at the legal system in Kenya, it is quite frankly broken. And I have good friends who work in the legal system. You look at the education system, it's triggered what's happening on the ground. If you look at the tourism industry, which was really massive for our economic aspect, is in decay. You look at the agricultural sector, it's terrible. You look at the infrastructure services. I almost lost my life a month ago on Mai Mau because of the road. The parliamentary system, the debates in parliament, quite frankly, are at best wanting. It is not the best picture. And I bring you here, John. Given your assessment of what's happening, what should we look like? And is what the government is doing today, what needs to be done? Is that what Gen Z asking for?
As an old saying, sometimes it gets very dark before dawn. And maybe that drives my the fact that actually the young people in Kenya are equipped to interrogate the society told me something about the education system. As poor as we think it has equipped them fairly well. They have a lot of them are pretty well read, and even their level of analysis it actually casts away the doubts I had about our education. It is doing a good job. If it is producing this kind of product and stuff. Secondly, this disruption that has been not triggered, but actually led by the Gen Z, is also pointing to something that is of a positive nature for Kenya going forward. We are at a place where I think we're no longer going to sweep stuff under the rug. And because the system is becoming more transparent through the force of inquisitiveness by these young people, the political class will, of course, try to maintain the status quo and draw the benefits therefrom, but it will be very difficult for them to do so. They will have to come to terms with the new political and social reality. And that's, for me, the historical role of these people. And part of the kind of misunderstanding, if I may say so, is the different wavelengths this generation is vis-a-vis most of the people in the political class. Because if you listen to them, the governing and political class, their understanding of the dynamics of society seems to be more constrained than this. It may just be willful, because surely they ought to have learned along the way that to be able to maintain a certain political or social order, you have to be always on the lookout trying to transform it so that you are ahead of what you may call impediments that could actually torpedo your efforts. I know one leader particular in this setup, in this establishment. He's very senior. He once told me to scrap history from the curriculum of schools. And he's choose some other subject which he said was more meaningful. Now, obviously, he didn't read history, and the results can be seen. Thank you, Dr. Kari.
John, good insight into that as we bring the panels here. Now, let's move to the segment. We play past how we got ourselves here, and I think I'm going to start with you, Natasha, if you could. Knowing what we know, good or bad from the past, good or bad today, and looking into the future. And I could request that you look straight to the camera, talking to Kenyans, president, government, or Kenyans. What should we really be looking for if we are to build a stable and
I think it's, and this is in my humble opinion, I think we also need to now start looking at the Kenya we deserve and what we would like that to look like. What we have currently is not really working for the majority of folks, but it could be actually down to what we are asking or what we are expecting out of ourselves as well. I would like us to move away from looking at the position of presidency or a cabinet or I would say any position as a position that cannot also get feedback or a job report. It is a job. It's a job that you go to, and therefore a report of your performance must be made in order to either give you your actually course correct. So we need to move from that. We need to look at and decide exactly what is it that we deserve, right? And as a whole, I would think there are some basic needs that we have: food, shelter, clothing. But I would put there education. I would put there also a good way of life, a future for our children, right? So we need to line up ourselves in thinking like that. Also together and put together a plan that actually honors those ideals. So the way that things were working and the way that we perceive ourselves has got to change. It really, truly does. It all starts with us and all the ideals that we would like for ourselves in the future. It's very important.
Thank you. Thank you, Natasha. Key point there as we bring from, I want to make sure these are underlined key points. Natasha is saying that if we are to build a nation that we deserve, that is competitive on the global stage, key element there is that we must look at the positions, not as super positions, but you need to get feedback. If you're doing okay. If not, we send you home and do something else. That's important. And she's saying it's not a question of changing individuals. It's a question of, hey, do the people have the basic needs? Education. I think key point there again is the perception that we have on us as a people. Who are we as a person? It's important that we have that paradigm shift. On the same question to you, Shadrach, going for knowing what we know, all these things, right? What should we be looking for if we are to make meaningful changes?
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Okari. First of all, if we are going to have meaningful change, we need to actually operationalize chapter 6 of the Constitution of 2010 with regard to integrity leadership, so that we get leaders with a high sense of integrity. People who have already been mentioned in corruption scandals, in murderers, should not find their way in. Number two is the question of corruption. We really need to address this thing with a sense of purpose. In my view, one way to do so is perhaps to give the EACC, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, I think they should be given prosecutorial powers, because they do good investigation. They find valid reasons to prosecute people, but then the cases are handed over to the Directorate of Public Prosecution, and cases end up being like the recent one withdrawn against a former tourism minister and among others who were accused of a scandal involving 8-point-something billion. So perhaps we need to give the EACC prosecutorial powers. Number three, we have had a sense of borrowing. The government borrows money from out there without participation of the public through their elected leaders. So loans are borrowed in secrecy. The public is supposed to repay those loans. So we need to open up the process of negotiating for loans. It should be opened up to participation, at least via elected leaders. That way we will be able to know what loans are being borrowed, how much is being borrowed, what is the interest rate, and for what purposes. It's only in doing so that we will be able to hold our political leaders accountable. But otherwise, as long as this is an secrecy, we never know for what purpose, we never know whether they go for that purpose or not, and that is the source of corruption in the country. And I think for me, if we do those three things, we will begin to head in the right direction.
There from Professor Nasongo, and I think those are very great points. So we have 6 strong points for those ones, again, who are watching us live right now. Please go on our KDL TV. If you have any commentary, feel free to make that comment there. And if you have any question for the panelists, post it there. We'll post those questions to the panelists right after this. So Professor Nasongo highlighted three points there. We need to talk about integrity of the kind of leaders we have. Quite frankly, that is a problem. We need to address that if we need a future. It's talking about corruption. At the independence, Mzee Kenyatta talked about the 3 hills on a nation. That was corruption. It's sad that 62 have the same problem. And lastly, I think the question of borrowing, I think I was listening to the clip today, that also has to be addressed, and I think that's a very good view. John, I want to bring you in. You are expert in this question. I know you've written a lot about transformation, aspects of government and all that stuff. If we are to look into the past, the present, and going to the future, and you're talking to the present government and all the stakeholders, what aspects should we really focus on to build the kind of Kenya that we deserve?
I think We did not reinvent the wheel. In fact, we don't even spend too much brain power trying to get away from it. There are blueprints of how societies have successfully, established credible, progressive, enterprising systems. And the often quoted example of Singapore is not out of place. How did this gentleman take God for second place and transform it into an exemplary system? Not in every aspect, but at least the aspect of things that you've mentioned, like integrity, having people who have requisite skills holding public office and so on, shape a society that conform to those principles. It is not that the governing classes in Kenya, they are not stupid. They are very well read, some of them. They know precisely how they think society. It's not that they are they're illiterate, no, but why do they insist on doing those things? Despite the fact that they know that those things in the long run do not work. So which brings us back to the structure of the society and the political structure of society. It's a patronage-based society. Corruption, in fact, as one political side, one analyst said at some point, said when he said, that is how the system is designed to be. That corruption, if you remove corruption, so-called corruption, because they don't look at it as corruption, those guys who are practicing it. They are looking at it as husbanding and collecting resources for political battles. So if you're asking them to remove their fuel for survival, what they might as well. So what kind of system is this that can only survive if people go extra, outside it, in extra legally to accumulate resources? Back to the structure of the system. And then that will involve all of us going back. I know people have bandied about this idea of a convention and so forth. And so maybe that's one way forward. Then, okay, fine. Can we take stock of what we have done in the Constitution? And can we make another effort to push a little further forward and so on? I know that in the ideal world, we should all have these things. Every country deserves better. So Kenya should be better. Every human being deserves better. Why don't some societies or human beings get better? That's the question. And we can talk about why we should avoid falling in this trap of beginning to speak, but like we're a religious card. We shall get our heaven someday, sometime. No, everybody deserves better, but getting to that place sometimes is not easy. That's Dr. Kari.
Okay. Thank you. Change is a very inevitable part of our life, personal and professional, and so is for societal changes. But except we are to move forward, I think that's key. What I hear from Dr. John is key. We don't necessarily need to bodies. We need institutional changes times, and that way we'll be in a position to compete with the rest of the world. And I think we're capable of doing that. Now, oftentimes I'm asked, Jeremiah, hey, you guys are abroad. What your experiences in Atlanta, Georgia, your experience in beautiful city of Maryland or here in Minneapolis, that is you there, but you don't understand what's happening on the ground. Yet there are also tens of thousands of Kenyans abroad who a good friend of mine called keyboard warriors from abroad. I would like you three to speak directly to the Kenyans in the diaspora. What role should we play in changing the social, economic, and geopolitical aspect of our country? And I'm going to start with you.
I'm sorry, did you say myself?
Yes.
Yeah. I think with forums such as yours, it's very important for us to continue having these conversations. And I know that the word dialogue is is not the word that we like to hear, but talking amongst ourselves in the diaspora, finding out how we can how we can actually come up with better ideas. What is everybody thinking? How can we share it with folks over back home, and get also their input and what do they need as well? So I feel like even out here in the diaspora, as far as it seems like we are different, we're really the same. And we can only do that through talking to folks like yours, finding out everybody, understanding and appreciating everybody else's opinion, engaging with folks back home, and also supporting them in whatever capacity that everybody is able to do. So that would be a strong beginning for me to do in the right direction.
I think I'll pose the same question to Shadrach. I know there's so many organizations around the globe, Kenyans and friends of Kenya so passionate. So what role should we play, if any, in shaping the future of our nation?
Thank you very much, Dr. Okari. There are a number of things that we can do in terms of shaping the future of our country. We already do a lot because remittances from the diaspora perhaps are the greatest foreign exchange earner for the. How we can leverage that influence going on is what perhaps we need to work out. Number two, we need to create networks and a link back home with other like-minded networks for purposes of supporting whatever good practices are being done at home. In many cases, the electorate in the country tends to proceed. The politics of the country is very ethnicized, or ethnicity has been highly politicized. And I think we have an opportunity to play in terms of sensitizing our own people about the need to elect leaders who have a sense of integrity, a sense of national purpose. And I think that we can do quite effectively given our connections back home. Personally, I have had many opportunities to be back home during campaigns. I was here during the last elections and participated in terms of educating the electorate about how to go about voting and why you should vote for this and perhaps not for that, because many of our people do not understand the interface between the leaders we elect and then the policies that are enacted and the impact of those policies on the livelihoods of Kenyans generally. So we have a role to play to that extent. And I think if we can do that, then we have impact in terms of shaping the Kenya that we want.
Okay, thank you very much, Shadrach. And I'm going to go to you, John. By the way, there are so many people watching and they're saying they're liking the contribution. They wanted to run longer, but sorry, not today. We have a few more minutes. We'll have another segment next week. I know Banya, Wing, and others will be on in the show next week. So, John, you're very experienced in this one. From your take, the diaspora community, of course, plays a role, but key stakeholders, what role should the Kenyans in the diaspora play in shaping the future of our nation?
We can do that. Thanks, Dr. We can do that personally at an individual level, which all of us do, just like Professor Shadrach has mentioned. We support, there's a joke among some of us that we are working in non-profit organizations. Individually, we support all aspects of the development, education, health, agriculture, our relatives and members of the wider community. So we are already engaged at a very significant level by providing the economic wherewithal to our people, those we know. But since we're also part of a wider political system, I think the question you're asking is how do we then broaden our perspective and inject our voices in the discussions that are taking place back home. Heretofore, I think the politics has been pretty ethnicized, mentioned this discussion. One pleasant thing that appears to be coming out of this disruption of the Kenyan political and social scene is the emphasis that this generational thing is about generational pain. It's not about ethnic pain. I don't know how far that message will go and what impact will have on the political dynamics of Kenya, but it's a good beginning nonetheless. And if we move with the perspective that it should be about how to kind of push certain policies, have certain economic ideas put in place, and so irrespective of whoever is pushing, don't focus on their ethnicity, then of course we shall have made a step forward as a country, and we shall have a General Z to thank for that, because I think that's where we need to go. Whether we like a very ethnicized society, people look at your surname and wonder, first, where are you from? It's a very common when you meet it, so that your idea is tied to your geographical origin, as if that is relevant. And yet, I think this is very, very interesting. They're saying, you know what? I don't care whether you're a Pokomo or this or whatever, as long as you're a Kenyan and you seem to have the oomph to carry this one. No, sell us your ideas. And you see, the political class, and I mark my words, is going to respond in the short time by re-ethnicizing politics to save itself. They're going to go back to try to draw the communities back in their cocoons. Melu, Ameluya, the Kalajins, and if they call for elections right now, it will still be on an ethnic basis. The outcome. So, Rome was not built in a day. This is a baby step, and I think we should keep moving.
Okay, thank you, John. So good take. By the way, I'll note this. My observation in Kenya I was in Kenya, Shadrach, of course, for a month and plus. There's something that I noticed that was very interesting. To your point, John, it's a totally changed world. The Gen Z have transformed the way we do things. What I saw in the streets, interestingly, were very many young people who braved question. I did not hear them talk about me, I'm Murembe, I'm Kisi, I'm Luya, or anything. It was totally non-tribal, which was massive improvement. I love that. And the second part that touched me even more is the fact that there are a lot of young ladies, women in the streets, braving the unthinkable because they think they need a future for themselves, their families, and their children. And I think you can hear that across the diaspora community, including no. We need to be part of the conversation. I think with that, in as many difficult times, really there's a promise for tomorrow. And because the producer is telling me, hey, you need to wrap this up, how about I be as generous as I possibly can, give you guys at least 30 seconds to make your closing statement. And I want to start with the ladies first. If you were to go to bed tonight and say a prayer to God for a nation, what would that be?
Thank you all. I just want to thank you for this opportunity again to have this conversation, and I hope that we have many more. I would really pray for us to have a sense of we need to do better, and please show us the way and give us the courage of our conviction. We need to have the courage of our conviction and to move forward.
Okay. Oh, that's a very short and sweet prayer, Natasha. You go a politician, so I'm gonna let me go to the nation of Murembe. Shadrach is on the ground enjoying Murembe nation. Shadrach, a prayer to the nation. What would that be from you?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity again, and I want to applaud the Gen Z for what they did, especially in terms of for pushing the government to do something about a good governance and so on. Well, and it's a new beginning, as Dr. Mla has mentioned. We should keep moving forward. If I were to say a prayer for Kenya tonight, I will pray to God, to Providence, to somehow provide with truly transformational leadership, or transform those truly transformational. Kenya will be a better place. Thank you.
Now let's go to John Amla, very experienced, of course. Your prayer to God will be what for our nation, John?
Most Kenyans say they are Christians, and without any bias towards against any faith, let them remember what Jesus said that seek ye first the kingdom of, and paraphrase here, wisdom, before the rest can be added unto you. Because unless we take that, we step back and emphasize the things we're doing right now, this primitive accumulation of things, materialism, then the country is headed in the wrong direction. Thank you
kindly
for this opportunity.
So, thank you for the contribution. I think with that will bring the end of the show. But to do so, I want to first begin by thanking the panelists for willing and, of course, accepting to come and participate. Of course, your contributions here have been very insightful. Hopefully that people listen to and they will take note of that. But more specifically, I want to thank Natasha Johnson there in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you very kindly. We hope you will come back again soon. Professor Shadrach Nasongo, thank you. Hopefully you are safe flight back to Memphis, Tennessee. Hopefully see you soon. Thank you. Also want to thank Dr. John Mola. Thank you for your contribution, but more importantly, thank you for the good work you've done over the years, not just for the Kenya, but also for the diaspora community. We do appreciate you. I also want to thank the guy behind the scenes, my boss, Ben Kebato, who is controlling the staff here. Ben, thank you so much. Putting forward says a lot for us. And the viewers, thank you so very much. Again, just a quick reminder that this is a series, the 5th series sponsored by One Voice Consortium, which is the umbrella organization of Kenyans Abroad. We do have over 60 groups that are geared towards making Kenya a better place. And again, next week, we will have another segment of this. We'll be focusing primarily on leadership government, and my good friend, Dr. Bonnie Awing and others will be on the show, but we'll also be focusing on women empowerment. So it will be all about women. What role should the women in the diaspora and back home do to grow the country to where we really need? So we want to thank you for that. And again, quick reminder that this this recording will be available on our KDL TV page. It's also available on our One Voice Consortium website. If you want, you can go there and watch it. Again, a quick reminder is that this is all about that you're on the ground there in Kenya. We do have a responsibility to play. Those of us in the diaspora, let's take advantage of the opportunities we have so that we can cooperate. And then in the end, we give back to our nation that has been given to us. Again, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week. It's Dr. Jeremiah Okali here in Minneapolis.